very, very cold. It is very, very cold here. Greetings! Oh wait, I was steamed up. Greetings from the Ice Cube. Let us talk about very good and very bad books. It's Leanne, and I'm only half joking. It is absolutely fluffing freezing here today. If I put on one more layer, I will officially be ready for a northern expedition. Welcome back to another tops and bottoms video, aka the video in which I wrap up my previous reading month by telling you only about the books that I loved the absolute bestest and the ones that I did not love and unhauled or set on fire. Actually, in retrospect, I should have kept all of the books that I planned to unhaul this month and started a fire, and I would be warmer right now. It's okay, weather. I understand. I don't have my shit together either. Now, if you watched my March mood reading madness video, you will know that I somewhat went off the rails in March. It was my birthday month, and I threw all my toys out the pram, and I decided I was going to read whatever I wanted to. That actually didn't work out that badly, to be perfectly fair. I read a lot of books. Some of them were decidedly better than others. But hey, without bad books, I wouldn't be here doing slightly salty bitching and you would be sad. Alright, so I read 11 books in March, and I don't usually mention numbers in these wrap-ups, mostly because for me, I don't find them very useful. I mention it only because in recent months that's been abnormal for me, and it does mean that there are more books on this list than there normally would be. I'm going to try and force myself to not give a lengthy synopsis of every book, and trust that if you guys want to check out the whole premise that you'll click on the links that I always provide in the description, because I really want to tell you what I think of all of these in depth, and neither of us has 42,000 years to do it in. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a book that is not only a new top, but is most definitely going to be in my top 10 of 2022. I have talked about this book so much since I finished it. I have shoved it into so many people's hands. This book is also the first pick from my Patreon picks pot. Why did I do that to myself? Why did I name it that? My Patreon Picks pot is a new project that I have started, wherein if you sign up to support me on any tier on Patreon, you get a link to a spreadsheet and you can throw as many books onto that sheet as you would like me to read. So if you would like to throw a book into the pot, the link to my Patreon is down below. And without any further keeping you in suspenders, the book that I am now obsessed with is The First Day of Spring by Nancy Tucker. I cannot tell you what this cover does to me now. Every time I see it, it makes me go like, It is essentially a creepy child thriller, and you guys know that I love creepy child thrillers. I love it when it comes from the point of view of the creepy child. So this book begins with Chrissy. She is 8 years old and she has just killed another child. It is a cherished secret of hers. It makes her feel incredibly special and happy when she thinks about it. It's something in her world that is only hers, which we very quickly find out is not something that Chrissy has ever had before. But as the book slowly wears on, we realise that Chrissy's circumstances are not entirely what we were led to believe. And in amongst this, we are getting alternate chapters where we are hearing from an adult woman who is herself a mother and who is terrified of this experience of motherhood. She has an absolutely rigid daily schedule for her child, which she cannot deviate from in any way. And she and her daughter speak to absolutely nobody outside of the chip shop that she works in, which is underneath her flat. And together, these two very disparate narratives start to slowly paint a picture which is absolutely nothing like we thought it was. I know I'm dropping like a lot of and there are huge twist bombs in here, but I feel like this is one of those books that I can't tell you any more about the plot without giving away pieces that it's really better if you find out on your own. I read this book in 3 chunks and it was gone. I was literally breathless at some parts of this because I realised I had been sitting like was so much tension in my body that when I released it I was like, oh god, this book is getting to me. By the middle of this book there were whole chapters that I just did not want to believe had happened. I couldn't believe how I'd gone from, at the beginning, having this anticipation of this really weird child who is taking you by the hand through her life, and somehow I had ended up with this bag of sorrow that I was carrying about. I don't think I wanted to rescue any characters as much as I did the two young girls in this book, and the older girl, which I just have so many emotions. I feel like I'm being so inarticulate when I'm talking about this. I usually have a very clear, like, this made me feel like this, but instead I'm just saying this made me feel all the things. And it's so weird because in amongst all of the emotions and the social commentary that Nancy Tucker delivers about mental health systems, about social services, about neglect and duty of care, about when things are just on that borderline of that's not okay, and so people decide to overlook things because it's easier, because the system is too difficult to navigate. It still holds on to you and doesn't give you the answers that you need until the last couple of chapters. And Nancy Tucker's writing is just a masterclass in how you can make things effortlessly beautiful while not losing any of the pace or the page turning nature of the story. I want to talk about this for the rest of the video, but I can't give you any more salient details because they're all spoilers. If you, like me, have enjoyed books like Dead Girls, in fact particularly if you have enjoyed Dead Girls and other creepy child narratives, then I say to give this one a go. If you are interested in a very complicated view of poverty and motherhood, I would also give this one a go. And if you have read any of Nancy Tucker's other books and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to transition onto fiction, I say don't hesitate. Just buy it. Buy it. Buy it. And Nancy, can you please bring out another book soon? I actually got so passionate that I have warmed up. Hey, maybe talking about books that I love will be a substitute for heating when I can't afford to heat my house thanks to Tories. It's just a little bit of political commentary there. Let's just get rid of that glare of truth. Next up, speaking of things that I don't like, let's talk about a book that I did not enjoy. Let's talk about Blue Monday by Nicci French, the first book in the Frida Klein series and the first bottom on this list. Ooh, yes! I hear you all. It's okay. I knew that this was coming. If you've been around my channel for a couple of months now, you will know that I recently tried my first Nicci French, which was the House of what am I doing with titles today? This book. You know that I tried this one recently, and while I really loved the plot, like I really loved it, I thought it was very clever, I absolutely hated the narrator with a burning passion of 1,000 suns. I hated the narrator so much, in fact, that it actually kind of spoiled the ending for me, because I was just like, I don't care who did it, just please get on with it, make her go away. So I have picked up another couple of standalones by Nicci French to give a go, but in the meantime I finally decided to pick up Blue Monday. People have been telling me for very many recent years to pick up this book and that I would really like it, that it would break my thing that I have with traditional crime right now, which is that I just don't want to read it anymore because I don't want like the grizzled detective or the everything is vaguely somber and depressing narrative anymore. And I will say that you guys were half right. I liked some of this book, but once again I absolutely freaking hated the characters. So again, keeping my synopsis short, this one is about Frida Klein. She is a psychologist. She deals with normal psychology patients, and she accidentally gets herself involved potentially in an ongoing murder investigation, and we also have the detective in the background who is investigating this ongoing murder investigation, which may or may not be linked to a cold case from many years ago. So yes, this book does have a lot of moving parts, and once again the plot was very interesting. I was very interested in what happened to the missing children, which is unusual for me because I don't usually like missing children narratives. And in fact, I didn't really mind too much initially spending time in the head of the detective, although he definitely does fit into that bloody grizzled, morose, the job has got too much for me, I have been handed this case and now it's consuming my entire life thing. And initially spending time with Frida was also quite interesting. She's quite an aloof person, she's standoffish, she doesn't give her approval very often, she doesn't like getting involved in other people's business, and she doesn't really want anybody to get involved in her business either, and that carries on all the way through into like making romantic relationships where she is afraid to make commitments and she just isn't really your typical kind of character that you would read an entire series about. But as time wore on, I just got more and more annoyed with Frida and the stupid choices that she was making. There were so many times where she clearly had a gut feeling that something was bad and wrong and she should have followed up on that. There were several times where she herself didn't really seem to follow through with her duty of care to other people despite what she does as a job. She's incredibly judgmental, so judgmental about other people's choices, and part of that is framed as like, well, she's at that point in her career where she's now directing a clinic and so she has to give other people feedback, but it actually just felt like she was looking down on everybody that she spoke to. And I feel like it's a really interesting example of we are attempting to portray a very strong and self-sufficient woman, but in doing that they've stripped away all of the things that would make me connect with her as a person. So yeah, anyway, despite how good the audiobook narrator was in this one, I will not be carrying on this series, and I think I'm pretty quickly going to read the other two standalone books that I picked up by Nicci French that are sitting on my shelves so that I can just decide once and for all if it's like they're just not for me and I should just, I don't know, go back to reading my backlog of Lisa Jewell. Yes, come up then. Hello. You're all such attention seekers today. Okay, so back to cheerier thrillers. I ended up also rereading a book in March, which I was just... In March, I reread Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is, of course, the first book in the Truly Devious... I want to say trilogy because originally it was a trilogy, but now there's a fourth book and there's going to be a fifth book. And that's actually the reason that I ended up picking this one up, because my lovely friend Kirsty, who runs a wonderful Bookstagram account, which you can find here, has been asking me for ages what I think about the most recent book in the series, and I was like, well, in order to read it, I'm probably going to have to do a reread. If you're here on my channel, there's a good chance that you either like true crime, mysteries or thrillers, and this is all of them, all in one neat little package. Quick stop synopsis, this is about Stevie Bell. She has been admitted to the illustrious Ellingham Academy after writing an essay which essentially says that she wants to be the one to finally solve the Ellingham case. Stevie is an anxious little bean who has kept her anxiety calm by watching true crime documentaries and listening to murder podcasts. But when Stevie gets to Ellingham Academy, it turns out that the case from the 1930s might not actually be that cold after all, and then somebody ends up dead. Because obviously otherwise it would be kind of a boring thriller. I thoroughly enjoyed this reading experience, and I took it really, really slow because the other times that I've read this book I have absolutely raced through it, and that's partially down to Maureen Johnson's dialogue. Now obviously these books have been published in like the last 4 years, so they do feel really alarmingly up to date. You know how traditionally published books obviously take quite a while to get through the publishing chain, and sometimes the events in them are set like a couple of years before they were actually written, and so when you get the book in the published market it kind of feels like all of the references in it are immediately dated. Like, it's still fun to read, but the technology and the websites and things like that they're using just feel a little bit behind. That is absolutely the opposite of what goes on in Truly Devious. It feels like everything's happening right now. There's chat about stalking people's Instagram. One of the characters has got really, really famous on YouTube for a small series that he made himself basically in his bedroom. Some of the characters actually hate social media and social networking so much that they've kind of turned themselves into like old-timey, we reject all technology people, and that's also a really good like juxtaposition to Stevie, who's like, I will Google the shit out of anything. I also just, every time I go into this, I just want to hug Stevie so much. She is the epitome of all of us. She has anxiety and depression, and it's really active throughout the narrative. It really influences the choices that she makes, and sometimes not in ways that she's happy with afterwards. Sometimes she looks back at stuff that's happened and is like, why did my brain do that? And haven't we all been there? Hasn't our brain got in the way of loads of things that we would like to do in our lives? But it's just always really nice to see that, because I feel like sometimes when mental health is used in a narrative, the character's just always really overwhelmingly sad, or goes through overwhelmingly sad periods, and there's no like highs and lows or peaks of panic and like lows of everything's fine now and I've managed to talk my way out of this situation that my brain got me in. And that is very much what you see in this book. So apart from how funny this book is and how real and current it feels, it's also super page turny. It's just, it bounces between the original case that happened in the 30s and some interviews and documents that were found then, and Stevie's narrative in the present day, both as her school project looks at this old case and as things are unfolding at the present day Ellingham, and it just makes you want to tear through the pages. And exactly as has happened with Daughter of Smoke and Bone, I have picked the second book from, can I do it there? Off of my shelves and shoved it unceremoniously into this month's TBR. And I'm just gonna make my way back through this series. Feel free to unofficially join me if you would like. This month I will be reading the second book, and then we can talk about it all in next month's wrap up, where I'm sure I will at least passingly mention it, because I love this series so much. Oh, how I wish the camera had been on to get the true depth of the eye roll that I did when I spotted the next bottom that is on this list. I feel like I need to just compose myself for this one, because I have so many thoughts and all of them are just why. Next bottom on my list is The Push by Ashley Audrain, and this one was marketed to me as a thriller and also another creepy child book, and it is neither of those things. It is at best a family drama about generational trauma. And when I say generational trauma, I mean this is a trauma narrative. There is nothing outside of it. There is no character growth beyond that. We are literally just again and again each chapter exploring the horrific trauma that these women went through. Quick crack synopsis time again. This one is about Blythe, who in one very, very freaking long letter, which spans the entirety of this book, tells you the story of what happens when she gives birth to her daughter and realises that something is just not okay, that their bond is amazing but there's something not okay with her little angel. And that great big letter is interspersed with another thing that I did not sign up for, and that is a historical story of what happened to Blythe's mother in the 60s, and that is how we see this generational trauma thing happening. First of all, the chapters that were written about Blythe's mother in the 60s were written like flashbacks, but with a weird kind of omniscient narrator, so that you were really kept at arm's length from anything that was going on in the chapters. Blythe's mother was written in just a vaguely unpleasant way, like you weren't actually supposed to sympathise with her and what she was going through, and yet you repeatedly saw these horrible traumatic things happen to her and her passing on this horrible traumatic abuse down the line. But there was just no opportunity anywhere in there to actually feel anything for the characters, because it always felt like you were being told what you were supposed to feel. Nothing irritates me more than being told that I should be creeped out when I'm not creeped out. I'm just vaguely bored and quite disturbed by the way that these chapters were written. This book also does that really freaking irritating thing of presenting all of the characters as like incredibly two-dimensional, depressed or angry beings. Nobody goes through their entire life with just a one note of rage or depression. There are peaks and troughs, there are hopeful points and joyful points, and there was just none of that in there. It felt like an endless plod through a tunnel of misery that I could not escape, and it was getting darker the longer we went on. And I don't mean darker in that thrilling way where you're like, oh, that was nasty, give me more. It was just kind of unconvincingly bleak. It also really lent on that thing where it wanted to be a discussion of nature nurture, and it wasn't. Book kept showing you examples of like how it had to be nature and be like, no, but there is also environmental things at play here, and I'm like, no, there's really not. You've kind of repeatedly proved that on every other page. And it's so funny, right, because I added this to my did not finish shelf on Goodreads and took a look at everybody else's review, and everybody who's actually like loved it has written this like lengthy amazing review about it, and then the people that have hated it have just been like, this was trash. And so it made me wonder like how many of you don't have a DNF shelf on Goodreads, and so there's no way for you to go like. So before I go on to my last top for this video, I want to just quickly update you guys on two books that a lot of people seemed really excited to hear my opinions about in my last TBR video, if you can call it that. The video wherein I told you about the 101 books I was reading in March. In that video, I mentioned that I was reading this short story by P. Djèlí Clark, which leads on to the novel A Master of Djinn. I think that, again, titles are not my friend today, but you will be seeing them both at this point. I really enjoyed the start of this story. I was really enthusiastic about the characters that were introduced and the government and political dynamics of the situation. I thought that that was great setup, and I was just so excited to see that like really fleshed out in novel form. But the more I went on with this short story, the more I realised that the other things that were going on in this book were just not working for me at all, because this is less urban fantasy and far more steampunk, and I didn't realise that when I went into it, because the synopsis of the novel very much reads like straight up urban fantasy, and I am desperately looking for another urban fantasy series to get into. The steampunk aspects were so much. Steampunk has this weird thing for me where it really stretches my bonds of disbelief, and I don't really know why, because I can read urban fantasy and even sci-fi, which is like very heavily technology based, and I'm fine, but there's something about steampunk which is just like, I do not want to read about sentient robots. I do not have any love for cogs and wheels. Yeah, so I don't know what I'm going to be doing about reading this book. I'm real sad about it because it's queer urban fantasy, and I was really hoping to really enjoy it, but I don't know. So you guys can tell me in the comments, like, do you think that I will be able to read the urban fantasy having not liked these aspects of the short story that come before, or are these aspects of the sort of steampunky stuff just as big in the novel, if not bigger, and then I won't like it? And the other one that everybody really wanted to know whether I had gone on and finished or not was Wake Siren by Nina Maclaughlin, which is another sort of Greek myth retelling, and I think that's the reason why so many people are invested in it. I think this one is on quite a lot of people's TBRs or like should I buy lists, and I did finish it, and it was fine. This is, as I said before, a retelling of Ovid's Metamorphosis from the female points of views, and of course the idea of metamorphosis is that everything changes, and so we find a lot of characters that are being changed into trees or into spiders or into celestial bodies or whatever. And once again, the writing in this is absolutely stunning. It's top notch, it's beautiful. It does a lot of playing with form on the page so that the language and the form kind of make its own kind of poetry, and it's beautiful. But the actual retellings were not dissimilar enough from the myths that I knew in order to really be giving me anything new. So I feel like this is... So I would say that if you are like unfamiliar with Greek myth but you are interested in like feminist retellings of it, that this would be a good one to pick up, because it will introduce you to a lot of those myths in fairly their original form. But if you are somebody who reads a lot of that and are very familiar with a lot of Greek myths and you have read a lot of retellings, I would probably give it a miss. And finally, last but not least, a top that I just wholeheartedly recommend. This is Hex by Jenni Fagan. It is a very short novella. I think it's actually just Yeah, just over 100 pages. And this one is a retelling about Geillis Duncan, who was a real woman who was tried and convicted in 1590 something of witchcraft and was sentenced to die. The story is told alternately between Geillis in her prison cell and a witch in the present day who is having a seance with Geillis's spirit, and it is very much an exploration of what happened to Geillis. And I can't really tell you much more about it because it is so short and anything else would be a massive spoiler, but I left this one with just such a lump in my throat. I read it in one sitting, as I seem to see most people are. Most people seem to pick it up and then just race through it because they can't put it down. It's really rare that I find a book about historical witchcraft trials which gives me something new. I feel like a lot of the fiction surrounding witchcraft trials in general, no matter where it's set in the world, ends up feeling really samey. It's the same themes explored again and again and again, but I actually found this so refreshing because it was less just about the historical injustices and more about these two women from two very separate times with two very different crafts meeting together and realising that they have a lot more in common than they think that they do. This felt like both a fairy story and something a lot more profound, while Iris in the present day is trying to comfort Geillis about what's inevitably going to happen at the end of this book. And just, I'm definitely going to have to look into Jenni Fagan's backlist after reading this one because I need more long form haunting descriptions like this, please. And so that is it. Those are all of my tops and bottoms, my very happy opinions and my slightly salty ones. As always, please let me know if you guys enjoyed any of these books. Did you like the same ones as me? Do you think that I am incorrect about my opinions about some things? Push. Also let me know if you're planning on picking up any of these books because I have convinced you that they are worth the read. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the thumbs up button. Your support is so appreciated. And if you are new here, then please consider subscribing and sticking around for more salty opinions in the future. And I will speak to all of you guys very soon. Bye! This room is not bringing me joy right now. I would like somebody to come and organise it for me, please. Applications in the comments. Thank you. I will provide tea and biscuits. Yeah.